On October 2nd, 2005, a man in Smyrna, Georgia, dialed 911 and told a dispatcher, "I just found my wife dead. Please send somebody. Please." The man was John William Peak. His wife, 44-year-old Casey Peak, was found lying in a pool of blood inside her condominium. She had been shot in the back. The scene looked like a botched burglary. Cabinet doors were open. Belongings had been thrown across the floor. But before the day was over, John Peak would make an admission to detectives that changed the direction of the investigation. He casually mentioned that he had once been the primary suspect in another murder, the still unsolved killing of his previous wife, nearly a decade earlier. 2 dead wives, 9 years apart, 2 staged crime scenes, and 1 man at the center of both. This is the case of John Peak. In the mid-1990s, John Peak worked in information technology at Lockheed Martin in Marietta, Georgia. He lived with his common-law wife, 46-year-old Carol Marlin. Carol was a program planner and engineer at the same aerospace giant. By all accounts, she was accomplished, respected, and financially independent. Carol had a close friend and former Lockheed co-worker named Margaret Ginn, known to family as Maggie. Maggie was 64 years old and a retired secretary. She had children and grandchildren. She lived alone in Cobb County. On the evening of June 13, 1996, Carol and Maggie met for dinner. It was meant to be an ordinary night between friends. Neither woman would come home. Around 8:30 p.m. that night, John Peak reported Carol as missing. He told the responding Cobb County officer he was worried she may have been in a car accident. He said he did not know Maggie's home address. Detective Sergeant Eddie Herman of the Cobb County Police Department picked up the case. Local hospitals, jails, and hotels had no record of Carol. Her dark blue Camry was not at the restaurant. Herman obtained Maggie Ginn's home address the next morning from Lockheed Martin. When he pulled up to the house, Carol's car was in the driveway. No one answered the door. With permission from one of Maggie's adult children, officers forced entry. Inside, they found a scene the detective would later describe as savage. Carol Marlin's body was on the dining room floor. Maggie Ginn was found in a bedroom. Both women had been beaten to death. Both had suffered severe head trauma. The medical examiner would later determine that Carol's injuries were far more extensive than Maggie's. Investigators described the attack on Carol as overkill, a term used when the level of violence goes well beyond what is required to cause death. That single detail told detectives one thing: Carol was the target. Maggie was there. Valuables remained inside the home. Nothing of significance had been taken. This was not a burglary. Then, investigators noticed something clutched in Maggie Ginn's hand, a torn piece of paper. It was an invoice from Lockheed Martin, and it carried a signature, Barry Webb. Detectives tracked down Barry Webb, a Lockheed employee and a friend of both Carol and John. Webb told police the signature on the invoice was not his, and he had his own story to share. On the same night Carol was killed, Webb said an intruder tried to break into the basement workshop of his home. Webb confronted the man. The intruder ran. Webb later confirmed to investigators that the intruder was John Peak. John called Webb afterward and apologized, saying he had been looking for Carol, but John never mentioned any of that to detectives during his initial interviews. Then came the financial revelation. Just 2 weeks before her death, Carol Marlin had changed her life insurance policy. The primary beneficiary was now John Peak. The value of the policy, $700,000. Detective Herman was convinced he was looking at a killer, but conviction is not evidence. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses that could tie John to the crime scene. Prosecutors said, no. The case went cold. John Peak collected the $700,000 payout. He moved on with his life. What do you make of that broken invoice found in Maggie Ginn's hand? Do you think it was left there on purpose to point investigators toward Barry Webb? Let us know in the comments. 9 years later, John Peak had a new wife. He had met Casey in 1999 and married her in May 2000. According to family members interviewed by NBC Dateline, the relationship soured after John took a position with Habitat for Humanity and began splitting time between Atlanta and Americus, Georgia. Casey discovered he was having an affair with a woman named Liza Kent. She moved out in April 2005, though the couple was reportedly trying to reconcile. On October 2nd, 2005, John Peak made a 911 call that echoed the pattern from 1996. He said he had gone to Cassie's condominium after someone reported finding her purse and cell phone in a nearby parking lot. He said he found her dead. Smyrna Police Detective Ron Waddell responded. Cassie had been shot in the back twice while she was in bed. The television was still on. Her glasses were still on her face. The condo had been ransacked to look like a robbery, but valuables remained. During the interview that followed, John told Detective Waddell that he had been the primary suspect in a previous murder, his first wife's. Waddell later called it the biggest omission he had ever encountered in an investigation. Waddell contacted Detective Herman. The two departments began comparing files. Then came the financial evidence. Cassie had a life insurance policy reported at approximately $500,000. She had been considering canceling it. Investigators discovered that John had been making extra payments to keep the policy active. He also stood to gain access to their joint bank accounts, retirement accounts, and personal property. Casey's sister, Jacqueline Kruger, agreed to work with investigators. Along with her husband, she recorded a conversation with John. During that recording, she said, two dead wives, John." John insisted he was innocent. Jacqueline also filed a civil wrongful death lawsuit, which gave investigators access to John's financial records, a pathway that helped confirm the insurance payment pattern. In late 2005, John Peake was arrested. He was initially charged with the 1996 murders of Carol Marlin and Margaret Ginn. According to court records and Associated Press reporting, he was later charged with the murder of Casey Peake as well. He faced 3 counts of murder in Cobb County Superior Court, case number 629448. Prosecutors indicated they would seek the death penalty. In April 2007, at the age of 54, John Peake entered a guilty plea to all 3 murders. In exchange, prosecutors removed the death penalty from the table. He was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole to be served concurrently. According to Georgia Department of Corrections records, John William Peake, GDCID 00009-05397, is currently incarcerated at Wilcox State Prison in Abbeville, Georgia. His maximum possible release date is listed as life. His status is active. Because Peake pleaded guilty and was convicted in open court, the presumption of innocence no longer applies to him. One question has never been fully addressed on the public record. In 1996, when detectives first suspected John Peake, they had circumstantial evidence, motive, and inconsistent statements. But no arrest was made. If prosecutors had pushed forward on the case they had in 1996, would Cassie Peake be alive today? That question has been raised by investigators involved in the case, by the Ginn family, and by Casey's own family. It has never been definitively answered. What is confirmed is this: John Peake killed 3 women, Carol Marlin, Margaret Ginn, and Casey Peake. He was motivated, according to prosecutors, by access to insurance money and assets. He staged both scenes. He nearly got away with it. He is now nearly 74 years old and remains at Wilcox State Prison. There are no known pending appeals. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you appreciate deep dive documentaries like this one, subscribe to the channel for more. Because in this case, the truth was buried for nearly a decade, and it took a 3rd victim to finally dig it out.